Welcome, everybody, to the Week 10 Best and Worst Predictions from CFF Lists. I'm your host, Jay Mill, along with my co-host, Willie B. As usual, how you doing today, Willie?
Still a little chilly, but still good on a Tuesday.
All right, good on a Tuesday. You guys will be hearing this on a Wednesday. As usual, if any of our best and worst predictions are playing tonight, we'll make sure to post a graphic at least so you can get a heads up. If you're hearing this, it probably doesn't even matter because it's Wednesday and the Tuesday games have happened. But nonetheless, if you're new to the show, what we do every week here is run through the year-to-date leaders, the top 12 quarterbacks and tight ends, the top 16 running backs and wide receivers. We give you our 2 cents on who we think will remain in the list for the remainder of the season, who might be dropping out and might be a little bit fluky, along with our predictions on who from the group will have the best and the worst weeks in hopes of helping you figure out who you might want to start and sit in some of your leagues this week. We do make it a competition. If we pick the best performer within the year-to-date leader list, we get 3 points if they finish first. We get 2 points if they finish second, and we get 1 point if they finish third. And it's also the same for picking the worst performers. If they are the worst, we get 3 points, etc. So with that said, it was a very exciting week 9. The late games, as we mentioned in the waiver draft, kept us up all night long, including that Hawaii game that started at midnight Eastern time. But we're here to talk about the guys that produced the best and the worst. We're going to start with the running backs, so we're going to jump right in. You ready to roll, Willie?
Yes, sir.
All right. I would say overall, in my pre-show note-taking, it looks like this could have been the best collective performance by every position group collectively. And we're starting with one of the groups that really hit a home run here with the running backs. First of all 16 played, which is unusual. There were no buys among the top 16 running backs. Out of the 16 that played, 11 of those running backs had 20-point games or better, and nearly half, 7 of them had about 24 points or more, 23.8 plus to be exact. And there were only 4 out of the 16 who had bad performances, we'll call them, that ended up with 6 points or less. One of those, or actually 2 of those guys, were sitting right at the top, as you see here. Ashton Jeanty had 5.3. He was your number 1 running back coming into the week, and Rasheen Ali only scored 3.5 against Coastal. Really still not looking like himself as far as Ali goes. We know he missed a game because of an ankle injury. It was a little uncertain if he was going to make it back for this game. He did get a decent amount of carries, but the Marshall team just seems not to be playing as a unit right now. We'll see how Ali's value is affected by that going into this week. We'll talk about that more when we get to our predictions. But Jeanty, I know, Willie, you went back to see what happened there. It looks like he got a little banged up. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was just really strange. I mean, he had a really good hurdle of a guy. He came down. I mean, he's a great athlete. I mean, it didn't look like it was much. Came down kind of funny. It went back in. Had one more carry. Kind of got twisted up on a 2-yard run, and then he had no more carries. And then and I don't think I ever saw him back in.
Yep.
So it's really strange. They're just listing it as a lower body.
Mm-hmm.
They had the game well in hand, so they really didn't need him anyway. So it may be nothing, or we just never know. So
Okay.
hopefully you have another option before they play Fresno, because that game is going to be one of the last games of the night. So hopefully you're just not stuck, and then he doesn't play at all.
Right. So again, keep an ear out for Jeanty if you got him. It's a sticky situation where I know it's going to be a little frustrating because he is, RB1, for the season right now. In terms of just recapping some of the other players, we'll focus a little bit here on the good, because there were some very good performances, starting with Mr. Ollie Gordon, who had his 3rd game over 42 points. Just when you thought he'd done it all with the back-to-back games over 42, he pulls the triple on us. And I mentioned to you earlier in the week via text. I don't know if we've seen a performance like this uh, in a long, long time. I can't remember one where any position, maybe outside of quarterback, and it's even hard to think of a quarterback that might have had over 42 points for 3 weeks in a row. Uh, can you recall anybody having a stretch like this in fantasy football, and at least in the last 5, 7 years, Willie?
Well, I mean, in college, probably not, but we would have to think about that one. That's probably a good research project and some downtime that we have
Right.
maybe on Thursday, I believe. But yeah, I'll dig through that and see. But not in recent memory, and
Yeah.
not the way that he's doing it after the slow start.
Yeah, and maybe we'll take a Twitter shortcut there. We'll post that along with this to see if anybody else has anybody that comes to mind. I know we got a lot of great minds out there on Twitter that can maybe help us get a shortcut to finding the answer. Is anyone out there knows? Let us know if you've got a player that's been as good or better than Ollie Gordon over this 3 week stretch of 42 plus. Another guy that almost caught him that came in second was Blake Watson. And Willie, that's the guy you picked to have the best performance. So you got 2 points for getting Blake Watson there at 43.9. This was incredible. This guy had 2 touchdown runs in the first quarter of 64 and 65 yards. And then I wasn't watching it as closely as you. You notified me that he nearly had a third touchdown on, I guess it was technically a reception, maybe some kind of short shovel
Yeah, a
pass.
little shovel pass. Yeah.
Yeah, that he took 64
Actually, I
yards.
think it was more. It was actually a design screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, but with 64
To the
yards to the 1 yard line, otherwise he would have had 3 touchdowns of 64 yards plus. But he had that's 3 explosive plays of 64 yards from Mr. Blake Watson. So you were right on the money with that. Um, I also picked Marcus Carroll to do really well, and he was the third best producer. I mentioned how he's a hard nosed runner, and he proved that against Georgia Southern. They didn't get the win, but he got his usual points with 32.8. And then as far as the worst, to kind of quickly cover that, Mahdi surprised you. He did come back after the big hand or wrist injury from prior to the bye week. So he ended up with 20. So
that
good for Mahdi that he's back.
hmm and
Any
that
thoughts on
pick
that?
that pick yeah, that pick to me, when I did it, it was more of a precaution of,
Right.
you know
We're
be
not
be
sure.
be aware that we don't know what it's going to look like, and it looked
Right.
like he it was still padded, but not like it was before when he had the lineman's glove on.
Yeah, and
So
there were
I
even
mean, he's
reports
he's
that the backup quarterback, who we thought might be the starting quarterback this year, Hornsby, was even going to, be possibly playing some running back because they weren't sure going into that game if he was going to play. But
hmm
clearly he did, and clearly, he didn't fall off too much from where he was before the injury with this 20. And lastly, in the recap, I suggested Braylon Allen might be, a little bit. Overhyped in some of the preseason lately. I do notice that Willie B added the injury icon here that he got hurt, but he did only end up with 6 against a very tough Ohio State defense. So, as predicted, he didn't do so well. But unfortunately, um, he didn't manage. For me, he didn't finish in the bottom 3. He was 4th worst with his 6 points. But I think still a good call by me to kind of steer you away from Braylon Allen and keep an eye out on that injury note that we
he
actually
didn't
this
practice
week.
he didn't practice yesterday. So
Okay, so yeah, it might be likely that he's going to miss a week. So we'll see what happens there. Let's see how the new top 16 is looking for running backs as we move up the list here. One thing you'll notice here is the big drop from Rasheen Ali. His poor performance they dropped him from number 2 all the way down to number 7. And then on the flip side, you got Mr. Ollie Gordon and his huge performance in the last 3 weeks, moving him from 6th to 2nd. And I know Willie mentioned last week, just 3 weeks ago, he was sitting out there at about 70th. I think you said, right, Willie? 70th or 80th even.
yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So Ollie Gordon is now making that push. Ginty, who had a 36-point average, is also down to kind of human levels here with 31. So uh, he's putting himself in a position for Gordon to possibly catch him. So we'll see, if Gordon can keep it up in a really tough game against Oklahoma. But with that said, yeah, Willie, let's get into who we think is going to actually perform the best and worst this week. I will take a glimpse here, and I guess the question is, do we bet against either one of us bet against Gordon this week? Can anybody outperform him? And you know, Oklahoma defense is a little bit better. Uh, they're not all world; they're more middle of the pack. We got Marcus Carroll against a tough team like James Madison. I'm definitely not going that direction. Uh, I tend to stay away from guys playing FCS teams. This is a dilemma that you have usually in the beginning of the season, but North Carolina is playing against one. So I like how Hampton looked last week. Um, he's kind of played with us this year where he's had a couple of big weeks, but then he's got some weeks where he's just kind of so in the low teens to mid teens. But I'm going to put my money on Omarion Hampton. I think he's going to get enough, even if he only plays 2.5 or 3/4 against Campbell. That they continue to let him get his yards and show out. So I'm going to go with Omarion Hampton as my best pick for this week. I like what he's done this season.
I like that. Like you said, they getting that fluff game. You just don't know how long he'll be in, but I don't mind it.
Right.
I'm gonna go Blake Watson one more time.
Okay.
They get UCF. UCF
USF.
they've given. I mean USF. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Sorry.
USF. They've given up 18 touchdowns on the ground, and they give up 155 a game. So I think Watson should still be able to get his.
All right, I like that. Again, Watson has been super impressive this year. Memphis, their offense is kind of rolling on all cylinders between Watson and Hennigan. Nobody can really, you know, hone in on one aspect of that offense to try to shut it down because they're strong across the board. And really, Watson's only had one clunker. He had a 1.3 point game against Tulane, which everybody seems to struggle against. But otherwise, he's had 6 games over 23 points. Uh, in 3 games, with 34 plus, including last week's 43.9. The other note about Watson, though, he's getting 4 to 5 catches every game. He's making the most of every single target. If they throw it to him, he has nearly it looks like almost like a 98%, 95% efficiency rate in catching his targets. If he gets 5 targets, he's catching 5 balls. If he gets 9 targets, like he did 5 weeks ago, he caught 9 passes on 9 targets. So he's clearly got good hands. Hennigan knows how to get him the ball, and he knows what to do with it afterwards. So I really like Watson and your pick there. Also, the one thing we did not mention when we moved into the new top 16 here were the new entries. You take a look at near the bottom, Jaden Ott had a really big game. Uh, so he's worked his way in from the number 22 spot up to number 14. That's on the heels of a 33.3 point game against USC last week. Everybody likes to pad their stats against USC, but that gives him his third game of the season over 26. He's had some modest games, from 13 to 16, and one game in the single digits though is all with 9.2. But he's coming off of that 3 point touchdown game, and then you got Audric Estime, who's come in from number 26 to number 15 as the other new name on the top 16 that you see here. So, really quick now, I guess we do have to pick a worst. And the Troy defense, you had warned people not to play guys against Troy. I'm going to heed that warning, and I'm going to take Webb, as good as he's been. I'm going to take LaDamian Webb against Troy. Sorry, 10th against the running backs in fantasy football. But we've seen them shut guys down, and we know they're the real deal. And I don't necessarily like anybody playing against Troy, so I'm going to put my worst on Webb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do agree with you there for sure. I'm gonna say we talked about Ott, but I think he's gonna revert back. I mean, I think
Okay.
Oregon is going for it.
Yep.
I see him, getting back to maybe not as bad as the Oregon State game, but definitely his Washington game that he had of the
Hmm.
13.2, especially if they have to get in the shutout. That means that they're not going to be able to just run clock. So
Right.
that just relegates him to being, a receiver, and he's not as good as Watson is.
Right. Right. Okay. So with that, that completes the running backs. The next position group on the list, we're going to move up to quarterbacks, I believe. As we move to that sheet from last week's performances, so this is the year-to-date leaders going into Week 9 and their actual game performances. What you'll see here is 10 of them played. If you exclude the guys that had buys, we had 10 out of the 12 that actually played. 5 of those guys had 31 points or more. We mentioned the fact that it was really difficult last week to figure out the guy who might have the worst performance. Um, I predicted, they would all get at least 20 or more, or close to 20 or more. Uh, that definitely didn't happen. Fortunately for me, I ended up picking the guy who ended up with the second as my worst pick. I picked Shedeur Sanders. He ended up having the second worst game and only managed 10.7 points. Uh, Willie B had one of the other guys who I guess you could say underperformed as well with Jackson Dart. He just didn't happen to score any points there because he wasn't in the bottom three. But that Jackson Dart did what we said he would do exactly. He's been a guy all year long who's had kind of a 30-point game or in the high 20s. Then he goes back to the teens. Then he'll have a 30-point game, high 20s, go back to the teens. He's actually stayed right in that sequence with another 17.6. But at the top of the list, you had Caden Salter with 36.5. That was my pick for best, so that worked out for me. Willie B went with Pavia. He blames me for hyping him up. I don't think I was hyping the kid up as much as just fascinated by what he did against his rival pre-game. But I'd say if you had Pavia with 20, that's not the most disappointing week, Willie. So I think you were a little rough on Pavia's 20 points, and probably just mad that you didn't score any points. But I don't think it was a bad lineup decision if you still had Pavia in the game with 20 points.
No, it was more of I had written down that I was taking Salter, and then so with the Pavia video and the way he was
Mm-hmm.
playing, I was like,
Right,
I kind of got swept up in the Pavia train and
right,
went
right.
against what I should have done. That's all.
That's understandable, and then you might have to resort back to your claim to only or your proclamation that you're only going to pick Salter, Penix, or Williams for the remainder of the season. Let's see, as we do every
That
week.
very well could be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
As far as other good performances, your guy Haynes King ended up tying. Our guy Haynes King ended up tying for best. He continues to make a great impression. You guys will see on the next slide how he's working his way up. I think maybe into the top 5, if I'm not mistaken. After this
Yeah.
thirty-six
If you're
point
ready.
five. Yeah, let's go ahead and see how that looks up there. And then the new top 12 going into week 10. Yeah, so here it is. Haynes King, uh, probably the absolute, well, maybe not the absolute biggest surprise, but along with Castellanos, one of the biggest surprises on the top 12 list here for the season. I would say easily. Uh, those two guys are the ones nobody predicted before the season started would be probably even in the top 20. There's not anyone that I can think of that had him anywhere close to that. So props to Haynes King for really keeping it all together. He's yet to have a game under 20 points. He's the new Mr. Consistent now that Castellanos took a little bit of a slide from 3 to 8 with finally his first game under 20 points of the season. Just didn't get the rushing yards we're accustomed to him getting as far as Castellanos goes. But looking at the guys here, the new guys that we've got in, Penix makes his way back in. We've got Jordan Travis, maybe a long time coming. You thought he might have made it prior to this, but he jumps all the way from 19 to 10th to make his way into the top 12, along with Cameron Ward, who was at 18th and has made his way into 12th. So those are your 3 new guys that have made their way onto the list. Uh, Sanders has fallen out as far as that's Shador Sanders with his second worst performance among the top 12. Believe it or not, even with a solid 20-point game, thanks to the solid games of others, Pavia could not hold that number 11 spot. Even with a 20-point game, he has slipped, below 26 and a half and fallen outside of the top 12. And the same happens with Smith from Houston. Smith's really treacherous game with only 3.8 points knocks him out of the top 12 after a short stint here. What do you think about Smith? Will he make his way back at any point, Willie? I know we were high on him the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think so. But like I was saying, K-State, they usually do that to some people when they play at home. They have one of those games where you just can't do anything against them. And so I think that that's probably what happened because now that they have Baylor this week and then Cincinnati and then Oklahoma State, so he has some chances to get back in.
I mentioned, Travis and Cameron Ward, took his place. If you're looking at those guys, you see they weren't sitting too far out there. We always kind of like to predict if these guys will stick around. So as far as Jordan Travis, this was he had 35 this last week. He's coming off of 3 games in a row with 26 plus. He's had 2 games with 17. Otherwise, he's got 6 with 20 plus. I do expect Jordan Travis to be, a name that will stick around here and, might keep a guy like Pavia from making his way back. Would you agree or disagree? You think Jordan Travis is here to stay? Will Jordan Travis finish in the top 12 when the season is all said and done?
Well, I will say that Jordan Travis has, in that looking at, I say he probably has a better chance to stay, as well as Pavia and Shador, than
Mm-hmm.
it would be that Donovan gets back in because Donovan actually, I mean, that game was so bad is that
Mm-hmm.
he's down in I think around 28, so he may not make it. But I think with Travis, he and Pavia and Sanders have a better shot of getting back than Donovan does as I look a little bit closer.
Okay, and then
So, but to answer your question though about Travis, um, I think he does. I mean, in 3 weeks, and you've been saying this too. They have what was that Northern Alabama? Is that who that is?
oh, I didn't know they've got one of those FCS matchups late in
Yeah,
the season. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So after they play Miami, I believe he's got Northern Alabama, and then he has Florida. So I think he does stay in the top 12.
Yeah, he was I think a top 10 preseason pick of ours, or top 12 at least coming in, and I think he proves us right and stays here. Cameron Ward's the other one that I'll point out. Let's have a little fun with this real quick before we make our picks. Cameron Ward started off super hot in 4 weeks. We thought, okay, he's finally caught up to the competition after moving up from the FCS last year. He had 40, 20, 36, 39, but then he hit a slump of a 10-point game and an 8-point game. Now he's bounced back. He's going back to 24 and 32 points to get himself into the top 12. Were those low games what we can expect later, or will he continue, his 20 plus point games, for the remainder of the year? Does Ward have as good of a chance as Travis to stay, since we both felt Travis would stay?
I think I think he's going to have an up and down situation because he does have Cal who can do some things, and then he has Washington. So, uh, but if going back to your question, if somebody does go, it might be Jackson Dart. So
Yep.
I think
Okay.
I think Travis moves up to kind of challenge May if I had to
Mm-hmm.
say something as far as Jordan Travers is concerned. So
Yep.
I think if one guy slides, then I believe Ward probably could sneak up into the 9 or 10 spot because I do not think that Penix is going to stay this low. He's going to move up.
I do agree with you. If we have to pick one guy from the list that might not make it when the top 12 is all said and done at the end of the year, it's the guy we've been hating on all year because of his inconsistency, and that's Jackson Dart. So I agree with you there. So,
So like I say, I still say that it'll be week 13 if he does have that slip, in my opinion. as far as
Right.
Ward's concerned.
Who's he play against Washington for the Thanksgiving
Right.
weekend?
Yep. Yeah, because
Yeah.
they have Stanford at Cal and then Colorado. So
That's a pretty good. That's setting him up pretty good. So okay, with that knowledge, I say yeah, he's going to finish in the top 12, but he might rise up to that 8 or 9 level even. But then Washington knocks him back down to 12. I completely agree with you.
mhm.
So
Okay.
all
So
right, so yeah, you're going to go first here. Let us know who you like as your best or worst pick among the quarterbacks for Week 10.
but we're going to go Michael Penix Jr. They have kind of like the Heisman Showdown. Penix and Williams will go at it. I do like Washington's defense just a little bit better, so we're
Yep.
going to go Michael Penix as my top or my
Right.
best
Okay.
performer.
Yep, he's coming off of a near 30-point game to kind of bounce back from his 11-point game the week before. I like that a lot, especially against USC. It's really hard to go wrong picking anybody against USC. But you know what? You mentioned it yesterday in our podcast that we did with the ankle biters. I didn't realize the Stanford offensive, their pass defense was so atrocious. As you see here, they're not only 131st against quarterbacks in fantasy football, but the Stanford defense is 133rd in the country. That's absolute worst for passing defense overall. You said they've given up like 25 touchdowns this year already. So I think that continues as Cam Ward gets to kind of go off against the Stanford pass defense that's really, really bad. So the guy we were talking about, Cam Ward, is the one that I think has the best week among all the quarterbacks this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, I'll note here,
Now,
we
so
both got away from Drake May, who's playing Campbell. I'm assuming you thought the same thing as me. He's probably not going to finish that game, and maybe he leaves the game with 23 or 24 points is why.
no, and then in this competition, I'm not hanging my hat on Drake May right now, so I'm
There you
sorry.
go. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
All
Let
right.
us know your
So
word.
as far as my worst, yeah, and I have this guy in our home league. I even started him last week, even though I didn't think it's just with those buys, he was just my best option. But I'm gonna go again. I just don't think we have to pick some good quarterbacks on the list, and
Mm-hmm.
it's his turn. So I'm gonna go Jackson Dart since they play Texas A&M.
Yep.
A&M, they're not horrible against the pass, but they give up 173 in the air and have only given up 11 touchdown passes. So he may get one, and that's usually his
His MO.
ceiling these days. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean that's just where he is, and so it's just not enough on a consistent
According,
basis when you have all
according
these
to
other good quarterbacks.
according to scientific research, which we do here over at CFF List, this is his week where he's supposed to score at least 25 or more points. Because, again, literally, if you look at his stats every week, it's a big
Up
week,
down.
a week in the teens, and he scored 17.6. So
Mm-hmm.
scientifically speaking, I'm talking real science here. This is going to be a big week according to science. But you know what? I'm going to have to agree with Willie B. We rarely go with the same pick, so we can try to spread it out. But it's hard to go against that A&M sixth rated against quarterbacks fantasy number, and he's just proven to be too inconsistent. Uh, I don't know that he's going to have the bounce back that he normally has after his mediocre games. He hasn't had a really bad one, but he's had a lot of mediocre ones, and I think he strings together 2 mediocre in a row here for the first time this season. You go
Hold
ahead.
on, hold on. I hope you don't mess yourself up because you might be right because after this they play Georgia, so
Oh,
he might
wow.
have that up game before he goes back down. So
Wow, how crazy would that be? We're going to move it up to the tight ends. Again, beginning with the performances from the top 12 last week. Uh, Looking at the group, probably one of the better performances, believe it or not, overall by the tight end group, because five of the 9 who played had 9.3 points or better, sitting right there at the top. Dallin Hoker, tight end 1, had 9.3. You might expect more from your tight end 1. Maybe somebody that gets in the mid-teens to 20s. He's done that this year. That's why he is tight end 1. He's allowed to have a 9-point game, which, let's be honest, for most of you, you'd like to have a tight end get you 9 points. We all can't have a guy in double digits this year. That's just been proven. But 5 of the 9 kind of showed out and did a decent job here out of the top 12. Uh, Top guy, Jack Velling from Oregon State, he's on his way to competing with Holker, if you ask me. He's a guy who's really stepped up, had some big games these last few weeks. He's passed that 3 games in a row in double digits threshold, I believe. Willie, what are the chances of Velling taking over tight end one here in the next couple of weeks, in your opinion?
Yeah, like I said, I've been, given that Willie warning as far as Holker. I thought it would be Bowers that would overtake him, but with his injury, we're not taking Bowers. Bowers may not play for a couple more weeks, but we've been warning you about Holker, and so
He's got a tough
that's
schedule.
starting to happen.
Yeah, nothing at it personal as far as his ability. Just you're talking about the warning that he's got a lot of tough defenses ahead on the schedule.
Exactly. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. So warning heated. We'll see. He still might be one of the better options for you. I think what Willie's really saying is he may not hold on to tight end one, but you don't see him falling out of the top 6 or 7, do you?
Um, he might be six. He just might be six because, like I
Okay.
said, I mean, I hyped up R.J. Maryland last week. I like what he's been doing, so he might actually
Yeah.
end up being six.
Okay. Well, speaking of your guy, well, by the way, to finish on Velling real quick, um, talked about the fact that he's had 3 double-digit games. Not only double digits, his last 3, he's had 25-8, 23-3, and 18-1. So, those are Brock Bowers type numbers. If you're being real here, when you think about a Brock Bowers game, you're thinking about a tight end that can get you good wide receiver type numbers. That's what Velling has put up the last 3 weeks. Now, keep in mind, he's had 3.5 4 weeks ago, and he had a 0 in week 2. So, are these last 3 weeks what he'll be the rest of the season? The jury's still out. Maybe we'll see if one of us picks him in the best worst this week when we move it up. But getting back to your guy, R.J. Maryland, he was the guy you picked as the best last week. He was the second best performance. Velling took that spot by the end of the night. But I mentioned the fact that this is not your big blocking tight end. This is, a very athletic, nimble tight end, and that's how he got a lot of his points on a 65-yard touchdown scamper. He was wide open, but a lot of tight ends, when they're wide open, don't do a lot with the ball afterwards. This guy outran a cornerback or a safety that had the angle on him and managed to kind of sprint down the sideline and make it all the way to the end zone, showing his athleticism that we talked about last week. Did you happen to catch that one?
No, I did not catch that game only because I just figured that they would beat the brakes off Tulsa, which they did. So I
Yeah, it wasn't
didn't
a
pay
fun
too
game, but
close attention.
the
Okay.
big disappointments were Cade Stover. We touted him as one of the most consistent tight ends all season. I think 6 out of his 7 games, he had been in double digits or at least 9 points. Then Willie B looks this up because I asked him, was he injured? What happened? How did he have no targets, no points? It's a mystery. The guy played in 62 snaps, you said, Willie. What's the data there in terms of Stover? Like, this is a real zero, right?
Oh, this is an absolute zero. And like I said, I mean, he had of those 62 snaps, only 13 of them he didn't have his hand in the dirt. So so he lined up as a wide receiver 13 times, no
Right.
targets. So I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's a mystery. He was playing against Wisconsin, who was really bad against tight ends. Um, I'm not going to call this a trend yet because he's got 8 other weeks or 7 other weeks where he performed very well. So I'm not going to throw in the towel on Stover yet, but there could be a Willie warning looming here if this keeps up, or maybe he'll give us a warning in the best worst picks. We'll see. Um, and then your guy Ben Sano, he was my choice of worst pick. He finished second worst with 1.6. We know he had been injured the week before. Looks like he did try to play and tough it out, but my guess, and I didn't see the game, was that he probably was hampered by that previous week's ankle injury. Tried to do the best he can, and it just didn't work out. The other note here, Willie picked Mitchell Evans to be the worst. He ended up um, actually having a pretty good game, but you informed me earlier this week he's actually out for the season. Do we know what happened there? I didn't even find out what took him out. Oh, you said an ACL, right? ACL?
Yeah. Coach Freeman said that yesterday that he's going to miss the rest of the season with that torn ACL. So I mean that's
Yeah.
really unfortunate for him.
All right. Well, that's too bad. As we move our way up, let's see how that shook up the current top 12. One thing we did do with Mitchell being out of the season, out for the remainder of the season, he is not on the top 12 list. Knowing that he's not here for the remainder, you will see that we've got Brock Bowers in there at the number one spot, and you might say, well, he's injured. He's missing several weeks. Well, he's still played in more than half the season at this point, so he still qualifies. And unlike Evans, he's still scheduled, they say, to possibly come back for the final weeks of the season. That might just be the postseason. It could be the last week of the season. We don't know. But because there's a chance he might come back, and he's played in more than half the season to this date, he still qualifies as the number one tight end. Holker, with the 9-point game, fell just below him. The guys that fell out, aside from Evans being out from injury, you had Harrison from Colorado, who we had mentioned was losing traction there with Travis Hunter back and getting a lot of the targets that somehow ended up going Harrison's way when Travis Hunter was out. Knox from South Carolina, I believe, is out with injury also. So Harrison's out just because of a lack of production. Knox and Evans are out for injury. Brenningstool now makes his way in, a big leap from 13 to 7 from the Clemson guy who's had 2 big weeks in a row, looking like a superstar there for Clemson. And then Dalvin Smith has made his way onto the list, the tight end wide receiver, kind of the cheat code guy who clearly is a wide receiver for Western Kentucky, but you still get the tight end cheat code with Dalvin Smith. He's finally strung together a couple of games back to back that people expected going back to last year. He's finally becoming the guy that people thought he might be. And then Nesbitt from North Carolina seems to be the tight end of the month for them. They seem to have kind of a different guy they've liked to target all season. So we'll find out if Nesbitt sticks around as the go-to target at tight end. But with that said, Willie, I guess I've got to make the first pick here for tight end for best or worst. And I'm going to stick with the guy I mentioned again on the Ankle Biters podcast. Go check that out if you haven't already. Our good buddies over there at CFF Nation do the Ankle Biters podcast that we were thrilled to be on last night. I mentioned that Brenningstool has had back-to-back big weeks, but he's playing a good defense at Notre Dame that only gives up 15 points a game. So it's they do give up yards, but they keep you out of the end zone at Notre Dame. And I just don't see the consistency there for Brenningstool to have another 15 or 18-point game. He might get a 6 or 7, but I don't see him getting to the end zone. So I'm going to go with Jake Brenningstool as my worst pick for tight end this week.
I got you. So yeah, and then so piggyback it off of the Ankle Biters podcast that we were on,
Mm-hmm.
and back to Stover, like I say, he's kind of bionic in some of his movement, especially with that big brace that he carries. So,
Mm-hmm.
and so with that, until I see otherwise, I think that they are actually trying to feed Marvin Harrison. So I'm gonna go Cade Stover as my one to shy away from this week since they play at Rutgers. Rutgers is ranked 14th nationally, only giving up 8 total passing touchdowns. So I feel safe in that regard.
Right. Yeah. Rutgers, pretty consistently has a really good defense. You might see here they're 93rd against tight ends, but again, it's a team that is pretty good at keeping people outside of the end zone that aren't named Michigan. So it's going to be their second biggest test of the season. So we'll see what happens. But I'd say Willie's going out on a little bit of a limb there, picking Stover, only because his zero came after 5 in a row with 12 points or more. Um, so let's see if that Willie warning works out, and if you're willing to take his advice if you have Stover. As far as my best pick, I can't put my faith, even though it's a Purdue team that should give up points to the tight end. I can't put faith in the Michigan tight end Loveland for some reason. I think I'm going to go back to the well that you've dipped in a little bit. I'm going to go to the Holden Willis well. They had a bye last week. Their offense seems to be clicking on a lot of different cylinders. Uh, Vadiato is finding Metcalf and Willis as a nice little twosome that he likes to distribute the ball to. He's another guy who's a little bit of a cheat code that is an undersized tight end that seems to be more athletic and faster than the usual. And for that reason, he manages to get open, get consistent points in double digits. That's why he's tight end 3. So I'm going to pick Holden Willis as tight end 1 for the week.
All right. And another guy that I did give the warning on, so that's the reason why I just trust Rutgers defense a lot more than I do
Mm-hmm.
Wyoming, because going back to the Holker
Right.
conversation. So
Yep.
I think that this guy here has a chance to keep moving up, and he might very well overtake Holker this week, and that's going to be Jack Belling. They play at
Okay.
Colorado State.
Yep.
I know it shows that they're dead last at Fantrax by the as far as pass, but nationally they're 108th, and they've given up 16 passing touchdowns. Velling
Mm-hmm.
just might get him one more and keep his trend going.
Yeah, I like it. I might have given you that one because honestly, I was moving a little quickly with my eyes around the board here, and uh, didn't hone in on the fact that he's playing against Colorado State to kind of follow up his really good last couple of weeks. So, good pick with Velling. I think you can't go wrong there. You probably agree that you can't go wrong with Willis at this point, would you?
No, the thing is that, like Velling, I mean, and like you said, he's putting up those Bowers numbers. Hell, 6 touchdowns in the last 3 games. That's
For
pretty
Vel-
impressive.
for
It
Velling?
as far as Velling is concerned. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, as
yeah, it's
far as
pretty
Velling
amazing.
is concerned. And then
Yep.
the thing about Willis, if he can get into the end zone, because the thing is, he's putting up his numbers with only 2 touchdowns on the season. That's
Mm-hmm.
what's impressive about Willis. And so if
Right.
he can get into that end zone, and he very well against New Mexico State,
Yep.
then we could be looking at the new 1 and 2 tight ends next week.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Let's see. Well, yeah, they've got pretty big jumps to make though to go from 13 to 18, so it might take them a couple weeks. But yeah, I agree. They both have the potential for sure.
Well, I mean, because like I say, right now Bowers is kind of window dressing because he's not playing. But if
Mhm.
Holker has that game, that dip that I'm expecting,
Gets that
you
goose
know
egg.
that yeah, if he gets that goose egg, and then like I said, if these two guys, I mean, they keep performing like they, I mean, Velling has come from a long way also.
Yeah, yeah. And look at Maryland. The guy we were talking about earlier, jumped from 11 to 6. So and you
Hmm.
said he probably end up in the top 5 sooner than later. So he's on his way. We're gonna move it on up to the wide receivers. And I may have misspoke earlier when I mentioned that the running backs might have been the most solid group. I did say that across the board, we felt like the year to date leaders at all positions had their best performance collectively for the year. But I'm going to go ahead. It's the group that we said did the worst last week as a whole. Their top 16 receivers, for week 8 were pretty poor. They redeemed themselves this week. There were 5 guys on a bye, believe it or not, an extraordinarily high number. But out of the 11 that played, they showed out. Eight out of those 11 were at 19.6 plus. So basically, 8 out of the 11 got you the 20 points that you would hope you get from a starting wide receiver in your lineup. 6 out of those 11, more than half, ended up with 23.9 or more. I think you'd be happy with any receiver that can get you, a 24-point game. And that left us with only 3 receivers that ended up with under 14 points. Um, so very, very good week overall for the wide receivers. Interestingly, one of the worst performances was at the very top. But if you look at the number from Fantrax, Torrey Horton played against Air Force. They were number one against the pass or against wide receivers for a reason, I guess. He ended up with only 10.2, which was the second worst. Um, the worst was Larvadane, which happened to be Willie B's pick. Another guy who shined and has flashed, but has just not had the consistency that you want. And he had 4.4. My pick, I thought Franklin might struggle a little more against Utah. Uh, they didn't struggle at all. He ended up with 23.9. I think we had a little over under on him last week, and his average was 24, I believe, I want to say, and we said he'd get under, so we'll call it even. Like he kind of landed right at his average to maintain, his position here on the wide receiver list. Um, but then as far as the worst, you know, because the receivers overall did so well, the guys we picked ended up not being in the top three, but they didn't have bad games. Adunze had his 21-point game. Lacey, if you're rounding up, we'll give him 20, 19.6 points for Lacey. So our favorites to perform best didn't win that title, didn't make it to the top three and get us any points, but I'm certainly not upset if I have Lacey in with 20 or Adunze in with 21. What about you, Willie?
No, I have to agree with that. And then, like I said, we do some things live here. So as you can see, if you can't right now, I did go ahead and add that little injury note to Horton here. So
Okay.
because he ended up leaving that game, and
Okay. Good
that
note.
kind of hurt his standing. So
Okay.
not sure how he's going to be this week, but looking at these numbers, it is very impressive. Like I said, I do like what Harrison Jr. has done, and then LeJontay Wester, man, that
Yeah.
guy is just he is just impressive and flying up the boards.
Yeah, and that was a bounce back game for him. I had mentioned that I definitely wanted to stay away from him as thinking anything of a worse pick because it was hard for me to believe that he was going to have two bad games in a row. The week prior he had 5.4, which was a huge anomaly. Because all season long he's been putting up 30-point games. And he definitely, had a big bounce back game against Charlotte with his 37, which was the top receiver among the top 16 for the week. And then Marvin Harrison,
Yeah.
continues to prove why he had all the hype in the preseason when it was everybody's wide receiver one. He's slowly working his way up the list. So maybe let's take a look at how things shook out after his big game and Wester's big game, see how they moved up the list here.
Okay. Yeah, and then one more guy is that
Yeah.
I'm not going to doubt any longer, and that's Jay Macklin from North Texas. He keeps his
Oh, yeah.
touchdown streak alive.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. He's, I think it's 6 or 7 games in a row with a TD for Macklin at North Texas.
No,
So
actually, Jeremy, he has scored in every game.
every game they've played eight. So 8 games, 8 game streak there for
Every
Macklin.
game.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, that's hard to do.
Yep.
Um, Now, looking at the guys we mentioned, so they didn't because everybody did so well. Harrison actually didn't move up a tremendous amount. He went just from 10 to 9. Wester, on the other hand, had a bigger jump with his 37-point game, jumped from 9 to 6. You see Horton with his injury game with the 10. He relinquished that wide receiver one spot to Malik Neighbors, who's got a tough matchup against Alabama this week. Um, and as far as the group overall, the only guy out, everybody here was in the top 16 last week except for one guy. Larva Dane made an exit, probably deservedly so. I don't know that we'll see him back. But for the second time this year, we've got two wide receivers from Washington on the top 16, but it's not McMillan. It's Polk. Jalen Polk is the third Washington wide receiver to make his way onto the top 16 list at some point this year, joining Adunze there at wide receiver 3. So welcome, Mr. Jalen Polk, to the top 16. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And then the thing about Larva Dane is that they have a bye.
mhm.
So he may take that that time off and never, like you say, never get back because there's going to
Right,
be some guys that are going to have some big games, of course. So he may not make it back just like you said,
right,
because I expect a guy like Joshua Cephas to continue to kind of rise up that board. So
right, right.
that may be the end of Mr. Larvadain.
Another guy that it wasn't a huge move, but when you're jumping from in the top within the top five, it's all pretty meaningful. And I wanted to highlight Malik Washington here. That's a pretty good move when you can go from number 5 all the way to wide receiver 2. And I think he was the second or third best receiver from the top 16. We failed to mention that on the previous slide, but he did that in a game where he had 12 catches for the second week in a row with 152 yards. He didn't reach the end zone, but this guy we've got clips you're seeing now. He was all over the field. They like to throw the ball to him short and just see what he can do with it. They get him the ball in space or in tight quarters. They're slinging it to him all over the field. But it seems like the strategy with him is he's going to get the targets. He's had double digit targets. He's averaging 12 or 13 targets over his last 5 games. Uh, and he's had 100 yards in 4 of those last 5 and only missed having it in 5 of 5 by 3 yards. So Malik Washington is definitely deserving of this number 2 spot. He didn't reach the end zone, like I said, but still managed 27 points without even getting you a touchdown. So if you're looking for a volume guy that's going to be guaranteed PPR points, Malik Washington is the go-to guy because they're getting it to him any way they can all over the field.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short because I know you've been talking about Malik Washington. I mean, he's actually been doing that for 7 games. As
Right.
far as having all of those targets, all of those 100-yard games like you were talking about,
Yep.
I'm the one that's been selling him short, and you've been on that one for a while. So he's deservedly number 2. He's earned it. So outside of that first game against Tennessee,
Yep.
he very well should be number 1 if you throw that game out.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, and he could end up being there. I mean, he's just about a point behind Neighbors, and Neighbors has got a tough Alabama matchup. So, maybe that's a good transition here to make our final best and worst picks for the week. See if we think a guy like Neighbors is going to get shut down versus Alabama or shine, or see what we think here.
I may have to buy myself some time, so I might do my worst here. I'm glad we caught that. I've been talking about Holker having a down game against Wyoming, but I think with that injury involved, we don't know what's going to happen. So many good matchups here. I'm going to take Horton, and I'll say that he slips a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, and again, you kind of warned everybody that he did leave the game with an injury, so we're never sure in college what's going to happen there. If you're going to get accurate reports, we could just say, look, keep an eye on the local beat writers and what they're seeing during pregame. That's the best advice we can give you there is find a Colorado State guy who's at the game and reporting from the field or the stands to let you know who's warming up and how they look. That's not a bad one there based on that. I'll follow your lead and go with my worst pick here. Um, I picked up last night on the fact that Colorado looks like they might have a decent matchup against Oregon State, but I started digging a little closer, and we all know about the offensive line woes there and how many sacks they've given up and the pressure that Shadur Sanders is under. And it's not a knock against these skill player guys at Colorado. We know they're doing everything they can, but that O line is the weak spot. Dion tried to call them out this week, use a little bit of reverse psychology maybe to get them psyched up. I don't think it's going to work. Oregon State, as it turns out, is the 14th best team in the country getting sacks. So when you have a team whose weakness is giving up sacks, playing a team that's used to getting a lot of sacks, I think that's a bad recipe for a guy like Weaver because Shador is just not going to have the time to get him the ball. And they might have to come up with a totally different game plan and try to run it against Oregon State, frankly. So I'm going to make my worst pick Xavier Weaver.
That's a great pick there. That's excellent. I like what you did there.
All right, good, good.
For
Hopefully,
my
I bought you some time. Did I buy you some time to pick your favorite? I mean, it might be a tough choice between Washington receivers here, with them both playing USC. You going to take one?
I was actually thinking about taking one of them, and then I like the Utah State kids. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Royals and Vaughn.
Yep.
Um, Man, this is going to be, yeah, it's going to be a little hard to do, but no, I'm going to go a different route. I like what this guy's been doing. I haven't taken him all year
Mm-hmm.
in this competition, so give me Franklin.
Um,
Cal is 116th in the country against the pass. They've given up 17 through the air, and like I say, Oregon, they're trying to go after this. If they're going to get into the playoff, they're going to have to run out this Pac-12, and it continues here with Cal.
Okay. I like it. Also, maybe maybe you're using strategy here, trying to get me hyped up about the guy that I was giving props to with Malik Washington, but it worked. I'm buying my own hype of Malik Washington thanks to your extra endorsement there. I like him this week as the best performer against Georgia Tech. Uh, at first glance, we're looking at Georgia Tech 59th against receivers. Seems like kind of a middling matchup. They are 81st against the pass, and they're not giving up a lot of touchdowns. But remember what I told you earlier. This is a guy that can get you 25 points without even getting to the end zone, because he's going to get you 10 or 12 catches and he's going to get you 100 yards. That's your 20 or 22 points alone right there. So if he makes his way into the end zone, that's when you're going to have your 30-point game here from Malik Washington. And because he didn't get in the end zone last week, I think he's due. Let's call it a 10 catch game for 120 yards and a touchdown. I'm giving you specifics this week on Malik Washington's recipe. Georgia Tech has also been in a lot of shootouts thanks to Haynes King. Even if Virginia is not in a shootout with them and they're getting their butts kicked, they're going to be playing from behind and have to throw the ball. And Malik Washington's the only guy on that offense that's worth getting the ball to.
I
So
got you.
there,
No, this is going to be a good competition this week because I'm not selling Troy Franklin any less either. He puts up those points also. So
right.
I like who we've taken here. This should
Yep.
be fun.
All right, should be good. And we did fail to give you the updated year-to-date score, so we'll do the opposite of our normal. As far as last week's official score, we ran through kind of the individual positions and how we did. In the big picture, it worked out that I ended up with 8 points. Willie B ended up with 7. So I believe that gets me within 2 points of Willie B now. I think we're looking at 77 to 79 year-to-date total, something like that. We'll put the official graphics on the screen here so you can see those. And but I do know that I'm within 2 points of Willie B with 4 weeks left in the season. So I'm coming for you.
Yeah, I want to say that we had to change one of my tight end scores or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah. It was a 7.
yeah, you're slowly creeping back in here.
All right. All right. So there we go. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Uh, Look for us on we've got the waiver watch draft out there. It's not too late for you to go pick up some last minute waivers. We have the Gridiron Scholar who joined us this week for the last of our semifinal picks with our guest drafters. Uh, if John can get over 95 points, he'll make his way into the finals next week against Nino Brown, who's had an excellent performance. So we're giving you lots of good advice all week long, but if you missed it, go tune into that waiver watch. You can find it at YouTube and Spotify at CFF Lists. You can also keep up with us on Twitter at CFF List, and as usual, over on the original platform, Instagram, at College Fantasy Football. Willie B, any final words?
Thank you guys for watching and listening. Good luck this week.